general too, because obviously back in 2023, they have a brand new agreement with the NBC, and they've been broadcasting those games since 1991, coming off a national championship appearance, barely just losing to Ohio State. And I mean, Preston, you gotta love what they're doing here. I mean, Marcus Freeman is one of the best recruiters in the entire country, boasting a class of 2026, ranked number 3 right now, and at least in 2025, certainly on the verge for another top 10, if not top 5 recruiting class. So what are you seeing from Notre Dame right now? And, how do you kind of imagine them shaping up right now?
I love where Notre Dame's at. I think honestly last year, one of their best offensive linemen, Charles Jagasaw, got hurt in the preseason. And they had a true freshman, Anthony Knapp, as a backup. And he just got thrown into the fire immediately. And they lost to Northern Illinois last year, but they bounced back and they went on just this incredible tear, and they made the national championship game with a true freshman, or I believe he was a redshirt freshman left tackle.
Yeah.
So he's a freshman left tackle, and he starts every single game. So, and Jeremiah Love, who I think when healthy is the best running back in the country, he was banged up a lot last year. They have a great backup to him in Jadarian Price, who had 700 yards rushing last year. Like, I think a lot of their issues of just being banged up last year and still making a national championship, that's a huge blessing in disguise, because now all those guys you're more experienced, where, and they're going to be fully healthy this year. The offensive line is going to be awesome, because now you get Jagasaw back and Knapp with a year of experience under his belt. So and then if you look on defense, Christian Gray and Leonard Moore are two of the best corners in the country. That might be the best cornerback duo in the entire country. And they're both back next year. And then, Jaden Grayhouse, I think a lot of people kind of learned who he was in the national championship game and in the semifinals last year when he kind of broke out in the playoffs. He returns. Jordan Faison, another wide receiver for them, he returns. Like, you lose your quarterback, Riley Leonard, but you have a 5-star quarterback in CJ Carr, who has a lot of potential, and I know Notre Dame fans are really, really excited about. So I think this is going to be a great season for them. And like you said, Marcus Freeman, he's recruiting really well, top 10, top 5 classes every single year. I mean, dude, they won the Sugar and the Orange Bowl last year. They made the national championship. They beat Georgia and they beat Penn State. I mean, I'm really excited, and I'm really excited about them. I'm really, really excited about Notre Dame.
Yeah, because I'll say this now. Like, I don't know whether Marcus Freeman's going to do it with Notre Dame, but he is going to win a national title at some point in his career. I think
he'll do it at Notre Dame. I don't think there's any question. He's going to do it at Notre Dame. Because
I was talking about this with somebody else too, and I think and again, I'm not from Indiana. I don't have any sort of like affiliation with Notre Dame at all. But to me, Notre Dame just feels different. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you go back and think of Brian Kelly, for example, it's not that Notre Dame was never necessarily a not a top program, but Notre Dame now feels like an elite program. Like, it actually feels like when I go and I do my previews, my top 10s, my top 5s, I sit there and legitimately think to myself, Notre Dame legitimately has every single piece that they really need. And you mentioned Carr too, which is the grandson of legendary head coach Lloyd Carr. And it's my understanding he probably will be starting. I think it's still a quarterback battle. I'm not entirely sure.
If I had to bet, he'd be the starter. I think he'll be the starter.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, because I mean, but that's what's great about a place like Notre Dame is you really, I mean, 1-2 punch like Jeremiah Love and Price. I mean, you really just have to make sure you don't turn the ball over, and let that defense cook. I mean, we talked about the secondary a couple seconds ago, and even last year they had Benjamin Morrison. And I sat there and wondered to myself, imagine if he was healthy all year. So it definitely would get me excited. But I guess my only real question mark is, how's the defense going to look with Al Golden now going to the Bengals and now insert Chris Ash? And, I get Chris Ash is well-experienced defensive coordinator, had a forgettable stint as head coach at Rutgers.
Yeah.
And it just, I guess for me, and what I'm most fascinated about with Notre Dame, outside of them, bringing in all these guys and all that good stuff, is how Notre Dame's defense is going to evolve, I guess, because they have all the talent there. I'm just curious about how Chris Ash decides to utilize all of them.
I think most coaches might tell you the same thing, but on defense, yeah, you need to have good schemes, and it's really just more about being disciplined and being balanced schematically. But really, it's, do you have the athletes to play elite defense? Like, do you have guys that can just run and just play sideline to sideline? Do you have corners that can cover? Can they play man-to-man? Do you have edge rushers with elite first steps to just go get after the quarterback? Like, to me, that's what defense really is just, do you have the elite level athletes to play elite level defense? So, yeah, Chris Ash, he's a really good defensive mind, but the way Notre Dame's recruiting, I don't know if they'll really take a step back because of all the other returning guys that they have, especially in the secondary. So I don't know. I'm excited for them. The one thing that kind of concerns me, though, they play a tough schedule.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, I got the schedule pulled up here. I'll just briefly go through it for everybody here and just so we all have it in our minds here. So they start off the year at Miami, which is really great that college football they're really prioritizing these beginning of the year kind of games to get those exciting matchups. Then they're going to be playing Texas A&M at home. Then next week they play Purdue at home. Then they travel to Arkansas, home versus Boise State, home versus North Carolina State, home versus USC, at Boston College, home versus Navy, at Pitt, home versus Syracuse, and they finish the year at Stanford.
Yeah, like some of those games that jump out, obviously at Miami. Miami, they've recruited incredibly well under Mario Cristobal, but they lose Cam Ward. They lose Xavier Restrepo. They're going to have one of the best offensive lines returning, though. So we don't really know what that Miami team's going to look like, but they recruit really well. Texas A&M, year 2 under Mike Elko. We'll see what they do. You lost a lot on the defensive line with Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, and Nick Scorton. But they still recruit really well, and Mike Elko's a really damn good coach.
They're going to throw the ball a lot more this year too.
Yeah, you think so?
A lot of really good receivers, and I'm just very fascinated to see how much of a step up does Marcel Reed take. I think he kind of has that sort of Jalen Milroe sort of skill set. You know what I mean? Where he has the athletic ability. It's just, can he kind of put it all together to a point where if I see Texas A&M on my schedule, I sit there and say, hey, I think that he could possibly, torch us type of thing.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but okay. I'm not a huge Marcel Reed fan right now. Just the things I've heard, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I get where you're coming from. Boise State, they're always a tough group of 5 team. At Arkansas, I mean, they have a really passionate fan base. That's a tough place to play. So it's just really the 2 games that stand out to me, though, are Miami, Texas A&M, and then probably USC. But we just don't know what those teams are going to look like. But I feel like we kind of have a general idea of what Notre Dame, at least what their floor is, and then their ceiling, it all depends on how good CJ Carr is and how quickly he becomes that good. Because we know he has the tools and the talent because he was a 5-star, one of the best quarterbacks in his class. That's why Notre Dame fans are salivating at the idea of him being under center for them. And they have a really good team everywhere else. So it really all depends on CJ Carr because they're going to have a really good run game, going to have a good defense again, great offensive line. It's really going to depend on CJ Carr and how they navigate that schedule.
Yeah, and I have to tell you too, I'm especially excited in the sense of finally seeing Notre Dame without a transfer quarterback coming in. I want to see how a younger quarterback like Carr, navigates having to play that environment and be able to play the tough schedule that now Notre Dame is going to be accustomed to with all the scheduling changes, and obviously they have the 5 games they play with the ACC every year. But I mean, I'm at the point now where it's at least double-digit wins or your season's essentially pointless. And, we can talk about the whole thing about should they join the ACC or not. I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole.
No, they have the best deal. They have the best television deal in all of sports. They're never going to join a conference. They're never going to join a conference.
Yeah, like the fan in me gets pissed off about it. But also, if I was Notre Dame, I'm riding that gravy train as long as I can.
No. That's just – they would be insane to join a conference.
Yeah, because I remember a couple of years ago there was a rumor about maybe them joining the Big Ten, but now they have the whole NBC thing set up, and they have the agreement with Clemson. They have the 5 games with the ACC. There's going to be teams in the SEC who are going to be salivating to want to get a game with them, just like Arkansas and Texas A&M did.
And because so if they do make the college football playoff, which under Marcus Freeman, they should at least be in contention for that every single year. It's a conference payout, if the SEC, gets, 3 or 4 teams in, you split that money between the schools that made it. Notre Dame gets everything because they don't have a conference. So they're just sitting pretty right now. They're in the catbird seat. So it's awesome. They should not join a conference.
Yeah, and just for context, too, the ACC generated $711 million in the 23-24 academic year. So that means that the 14 full-time ACC schools got about $45 million a year for context. That just shows you this kind of the spot that Notre Dame's into, because they're probably generating very similar number, if not more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so I'm really excited about Notre Dame. Like I said, I think when healthy, Jeremiah Love is the best running back in all of football. I love watching Jeremiah Love. He's an absolute stud. And they have a really good backup to him in Jadarian Price. I'm really excited about this Notre Dame team. Unless they just get ravaged by injury, there's no reason they should not be in the CFB contention late in the year. I think they should make the 12 team.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know I talked about Chris Ash a couple seconds ago, but that's me nitpicking when I'm talking about serious weaknesses on this team. Now, granted, the quarterback's not going to be as experienced. There's just so many mitigating factors. But I sit there and say to myself, when you have a guy like Marcus Freeman, you have a well-experienced staff, you have a number of guys who are coming back. To me, this just seems like a recipe for Notre Dame to be maybe even one of the top teams that we're going to be talking about in November and December going to the college football playoff.
One other point, because I don't know if people really talk about this point.
Yeah.
So remember a few years ago when Luke Fickell was the hot coach at Cincinnati? Yeah. He made the college football playoff at Cincinnati. Then he went to Wisconsin.
Right.
Marcus Freeman took most of that staff to Notre Dame with him. And Luke Fickell has been very up and down, mostly down at Wisconsin. And Notre Dame is on the rise. So I think you have to give a lot of credit to not just Marcus Freeman, but that entire staff that he took with him. Because they have they have a really good track record of success.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too, because that just ringed in a thought in my head. I wish I was I was a fly in the wall when this conversation happened, but everybody knew that Phil Longo being the offense coordinator with was not going to work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's just I don't understand. I don't know. I could go on and on about this, but you're Wisconsin, your bread and butter is you're going to get big, ugly bastards up front from the Midwest, and you're just going to run the ball with great running backs. We're going to pound the rock. So your Luke Fickell and you bring in a fucking air raid guy, that everyone knew that wasn't going to work. It's dumb. I still get mad about that. That was so stupid.
But hey, there's a silver lining now. Phil Longo is now the head coach at Sam Houston State, so he's going to be able to figure out his air raid offense down there.